Hello and welcome to the Under Centre podcast. The AFI season is in the books and we start to look at the NFL season 2023-2024. I am joined here by Rian. It's an all Malloy podcast. Dara's going to have a bit of a break after the long and hard effort that he made towards the end of the AFI season to bring you the best content that we could. Rian, how are you?
I'm good. Sad to see the back end of the AFI season, but excited to see the start of a new NFL season. It's crazy to think that we're like a month away from watching football, albeit pre-season football. But look, I'm excited nonetheless.
Yeah, look, we're going to kind of feel it out as we go through the show. A lot of kind of slow news days in the NFL around this time of the year. So we're just going to talk about some of the major talking points, maybe some opinions we have as we look towards the preseason. And we might start it off, Rian, with the round of uniform announcements that starts to come out this time of year. Nike obviously developed them in the background and the teams have been developing. Of course, they can now use new helmets as well. We see the Broncos introducing an alternative helmet. The Colts are going to introduce an alternative helmet to go with their alternative uniform. But one of all the uniforms, specifically the throwback uniforms, stood out to me, Rain. And it's not the creamsicle that is the Buccaneers. I think that's quite nice. It is the most irrelevant throwback uniform ever made, I would argue, and that is the Seattle Seahawks. And you know why? Because you're throwing back to absolutely nothing. It's a team with no heritage. The only thing they've ever done is draft Russell Wilson in the NFL. What are you throwing back to? Some 90s team that nobody remembers a single player from? We don't have the lads here. We don't have Al or Dara to back them up, so we get to bash on them a little bit. What did you think of the announcement? Do you think it's a nice jersey? How do you think it came out?
I mean, it for me, it is quite a nice jersey, all right, because they did have some nice jerseys back in the day, and it is like an identical replica pretty much of what it was back then. And I understand that you can't do a whole lot with throwback jerseys, but I feel like they could have done more. For me, the throwback jerseys that rank above them are definitely the Vikings. Those ones are pretty slick with the kind of they're almost like matte purple, pretty cool. And then obviously the creamsicles on top, and that's coming from a guy who supports an NFC South team. Those Buccaneers throwback jerseys are unbelievable. Paired with that white helmet with the old school logo, perfection.
Yeah, it's really nice. Again, and it goes back to my first point. The beef I have with the Seahawks throwback is what are you throwing back to? There's nothing special about that area. Like I said, yeah, it's a lovely color. It's a nice jersey. It pops. But like, why? At least the Titans are thrown back to the Oilers. The Buccaneers have won a Super Bowl recently. They're pretty relevant, so they're thrown back to this lovely old colorway. Like, what are the Seahawks celebrating?
Yeah, the Buccaneers are a much older franchise than the Seahawks. The Seahawks haven't been around as long as the Buccaneers, I don't believe. So, yeah, I understand it for the Buccaneers. I don't understand it for the Seahawks. It'd be like the Panthers thrown back to a uniform. Like, what are they doing? They were only formed in 1995 or whatever it is. They haven't changed the jerseys since then at all, though, which is pretty shitty. But, hey.
Yeah, and it reminds me as well as a little bit of like, it's not even like the Jaguars where they've kind of changed styles and logos and stuff like really rapidly over the last few years. Like the Seahawks logo is the Seahawks logo. The jerseys are roughly the same. They've got a lot darker over the last few years. And again, I don't want to bash the color. The color is nice, but I'm just like, is this a cash grab for all the fans that you're just kind of throwing up? And they did the gimmick of the websites in the Windows 90 or Windows Vista or whatever it was, and it looks like a throwback website as well. And like, yeah, it's interesting, it's cool, but where's the heritage? What are you celebrating? Is it just a throwback jersey, just to have another jersey on the market that you kind of go? And we were talking in the group chat, obviously, and I'm saying like, yeah, I think it's fine. It's a fine jersey. By no means is it the best throwback. And the two lads, Dara and Al, were going 90 saying, this is amazing. They've absolutely nailed it. It looks class. It's the best one ever. And I was kind of having a bit of banter with them. I was saying like, yeah, the Seahawks fans are absolutely the most delusional fans in the NFL. We had this conversation when me and you were looking at Russell Wilson. We're like, this guy's looking shaky. And Al said, no, we're not delusional. Like as soon as he fell off the cliff, we accepted that he fell off the cliff. And I was like, no, lads, everyone could see when he fell off the cliff.
Too late.
Exactly. You were delusional the previous 2 seasons when everyone else saw it coming. And like, I guess that feeds into a second point that we kind of didn't really plan to bring up, but I might as well while we're here. The Broncos, they still have that Mr. Russell Wilson on their books to mad money. Everyone had them as preseason Super Bowl favorites last year. There's been very little talk about them this year. Well, give us a brief summary. I don't know if you've even thought about the Broncos so far. They do have their nice helmet. You can talk about that. But what do you think about the QB situation? I mean, they're locked in. They're not going to get a change now at this point.
They are locked in, yeah, but I don't think it's going to be the unmitigated shit show that it was last season. He's got a year under his belt with a new team. We know that there's enough there from Russell Wilson. I mean, he's a two-time Super Bowl MVP. The guy must have a bit of ball left in him. So, yeah, I don't suspect it's going to be the same unmitigated disaster. If they can get a decent kind of cohesive offense going, rely a little bit more on the running game, he should be able to manage that offense quite well. And then they do have stud players on both sides of the ball that he can really rely on. So I expect him to be stingy again on defense. I expect the offense to improve just a little bit. So I don't see it being as bad as it was last season, but I can't see them getting out of that division, not with the Chiefs and the Chargers in there as well.
No, look, I totally agree. Anytime you got to come up against the Chiefs, they're a juggernaut at the moment. And like you said, I do agree. They've got a great defense. They showed that last year as well. A lot of young talent on that defense as well. And he doesn't need to do much to get back to being at least maybe not relevant in terms of top QBs, but be effective as the QB of the Broncos. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think there's a little bit of a chance that they certainly improve on last year. I don't think that's a major ask, but to have to beat the Chiefs, even forget about everyone else in the division, just trying to beat the Chiefs and fight for that extra wildcard slot is going to be difficult. One team that I think has a little bit of a similarity, or maybe doesn't, in that this quarterback is coming in hot, is the New York Jets. And obviously Aaron Rodgers has started there. We haven't seen a whole lot out of them on social media about him like throwing the ball or anything. And there's a little bit of a discussion. I don't know if you saw, Rian, they announced like the new white jersey, and he looks like, someone commented on Twitter, like he looks like a guy wearing a Halloween costume of Aaron Rodgers. His helmet is about 6 inches above his head. He looks so scrawny in the pad style that he wears. And of course he has got that old style loose cut sleeves, which was always his style. How do you think he's going to fit in? They, again, another team with a lot of weapons around. Do you think he's going to take the same amount of ramp up as Russell Wilson, or are you expecting him to more hit the ground quicker?
No, I think it's a big call, but I think we are seeing the cliff of Aaron Rodgers, right? Nobody talks about the season that he had last season with the Green Bay Packers. He was dog rough. I got to see him in person, and he was bad. Now, a lot of people blame the injury to his thumb on that, and maybe it's got something to do with it, but he went MVP season, and then fell off. And it wasn't like the talent around him got any worse. He had the same offensive line. He had the same running backs. The wide receivers moved around a little bit, but they were not. It wasn't a wholesale change. I mean, I know they lost Devontae Adams, but he still had an MVP season after that. So, yeah, I think he has gone off the end of the cliff. And I mean, like, it's not as much of a leap for him. He's, 40 years old at this stage. He's coming to the end of his career, regardless of what anybody says. So I see it probably being a tough transition for him with the Jets. But thankfully, he does have a lot of talent around him there at the Jets. The running back situation, very, very good. Obviously, the wide receivers, he's bringing in guys that he knows. Alan Lazard has come in. So I see that being at least a comfortable start for him. If he can get a couple of wins under his belt, he'll start ramping up with his confidence that I think he lost a bit last season. So, yeah, I think I can't see them being this Super Bowl contender that everybody makes them. But, yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I think that's the flyer you took on Aaron Rodgers, right? And I do feel like he suffers a little bit from his greatness that he had the previous 2 MVP seasons. And like you're saying, he got a bit bashed, and the way you were looking at it, saying that the wide receiver core didn't get any worse, but it certainly didn't get any better either. And I think he did a lot to make that wide receiver core work. And at some point, it was just not going to gel well enough for him to be able to do it. They had a good running game in Green Bay. They will have a good running game in the Jets as well. I do like their offensive line, and I really like their their running backs. I hope Breece Hall can be healthy this year. I think that's a really explosive asset to have. And they have really top quality, maybe 2 top quality wide receivers. And that's something that he didn't have, even with what's his name? He just named him, the wide receiver that left.
Davante Adams.
With Davante Adams. They never really had, they had Lazard here and there, and he's performed well once he's moved away. So I think they have assets there that are going to be able to compete. But again, like you, I think the Aaron Rodgers plan for the Jets can't be Super Bowl year 1. You're going to have to give him a year to get ready. I think the obvious comparison to make is Brady to the Bucs and what he did as soon as he stepped into that Bucs camp. But I think the Bucs were much more established. They had a much nicer range of vet to rookie and a very high talent ceiling. I think that the Jets have the same talent ceiling, but they don't have that same experience across the board that's really going to help him and get him to be able to fit in and mold and have guys around him that are used to dealing with top level talent, either behind them at the quarterback position or just in rooms in general. I think what he does best, depending on the stories that you listen to, is get his point across and get the team on the same page. Now, the method that he does it rubs a lot of guys up the wrong way, but you can't argue that for years that Green Bay Packers team was great when he rolled out and they were playing scramble football. Everybody knew what the rules were, and that's how they really damaged teams. But yeah, I think that's quite interesting. Another interesting quarterback situation, Rian, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We talked about their great jerseys. They don't have 2 great quarterback options, or at least from the videos that have been released, of course, famously when the kind of the OTAs started, they had the 2 quarterbacks. I've gone blank again. What are their names?
Trask and Mayfield.
Trask and Mayfield. Mayfield is the presumptive number 1, I guess, at the moment. Although it doesn't look like either of them are really grasping the situation. Now, you never know. It's throws against God knows who. Like, who knows who they're thrown to? Who knows if they're running the routes correctly? But not 2 kind of fly balls. What have you made of that situation? And do you think it's even best case? Do you think it's a good QB room to have?
It's fun to see as a Carolina Panthers fan that they're going with the guy that we kicked out at the end of last season. Yeah, it's a really strange one because I don't think the Bucs have made that decision themselves on whether they want to go with Trask or whether they want to go with Mayfield. I mean, even when they brought out the creamsicle jerseys, the 2 guys that they had advertising it, and usually you have obviously your quarterback and then a couple of stud players, but they had Trask and Mayfield both as their like number 1 guy in that kind of campaign, which is just strange to me. You kind of need to be naming a starter, and Mayfield had this issue as he was coming into the Panthers organization where he was not the out and out number 1. There was Sam Darnold still in the room, and it was a question of who's going to play. He eventually won the starting job, but I think that really hurt Baker Mayfield in his confidence and the way he played. And we saw that he was missing open shots with the Panthers, stuff that he didn't really do with the Browns. And if you're going to put him in that situation again with the Bucs, I can't see it being very successful. It might be, I mean, the Bucs are in a pretty bad situation with cap and all that sort of thing. This might be a season to tank, fire sale at the end of the season, get all those vets and the big contracts out of there and rebuild kind of in the Jets model where you're getting in a lot of young guys, talent across the board, but coming out of college, and see where they roll from there. But yeah, for me, it's not an ideal situation for them.
Yeah, look, I think you kind of nailed it there, where Baker Mayfield, when he was with the Browns, you have to lean on his aggression. If you get him in, you know he's an aggressive player. You know he has to take shots. And when he feels comfortable and he feels confident, he starts to make those shots. There were some great touchdowns that he threw the Browns in the kind of start to middle of that season, that the great season that he had with them before he left. And I think you need to be able to do that. So if you're the Buccaneers, you have to make that call early, and you have to make it clear that he has the job 100%. He doesn't have someone breathing down the back of his neck. The only issue I have is I don't know enough about Kyle Trask. He played in Miami, I believe. We didn't see a whole lot out of him over the last season. And so I don't know. I don't know what he's like on the ground, if he has that prototypical quarterback style now that teams like, where you are a threat, at least with your legs. even if it's not your first option, that you can wheel out and make some yards on the ground. So I think that'll be interesting to see. I absolutely agree with you as well. The Buccaneers are an old team now, plenty of talent, but it's getting old. And I would like to see them find the next Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans is coming to the end. I know that's harsh. He's still producing very well, but he doesn't have 5 more years, in my opinion. He's 2 definitely good more years. And then after that, you're kind of trying to see where he goes. You're playing it year to year then. So I think they're in a dangerous mode. I do like your idea of go for a fire sale, go like the Jets. But again, I think you got to be careful. The Jets got really lucky where they got 2 high picks on a deep draft class. If you end up with all your picks on a shallow draft class, you might as well throw the picks away because you're not getting that value for what you gave away. And they certainly have a lot of experience. And that's the only thing I think we saw it with Brady, and why Brady was so effective is on those close games where kind of the vets can keep it tight and keep it gritty. He was able to manage the game and make it through. If you've got a hot shot or a young kid in there who's either trying to make a name or trying to prove that they're on the comeback trail, whichever one you ends up being the starter, I think the veteran move then, or the veteran play style, suffers a little bit because they're all about keeping the game tight, being pros, old pros, knowing the little tricks and just getting under the defender's skin, but it's not necessarily explosive. And that's where you're going to suffer.
I got to be honest, I'm surprised that they haven't made a move for Ryan Tannehill yet. I presume Ryan Tannehill is not going to be starting out there in Tennessee, given that they've drafted a quarterback in the last 2 years. So he's a guy that I feel fits that system. So if they're in a mood to play football that wins, play football that they know works, Tannehill seems to fit that mold very well for me. So maybe it is a case of a proper tank season for them.
Well, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier, right? The cap situation there in Tampa is not fantastic. And so being a former starter, I think Tannehill's probably trying to command a little bit of extra money, probably Mayfield money. And you're kind of then, you're paying top tier money for 2 quarterbacks that are neither of which are top tier, I would imagine.
Well, you see, he's still under contract with the Tennessee Titans, so they can probably get him for next to nothing because the Titans will have to cut him at some point anyway, or keep him there as a backup. So if they can get any amount of money off the books, I'd say it would probably suit the Titans. So yeah, I if they're looking to win, that would be the move that I would be making.
And so moving on from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the Carolina Panthers, Rian, your team. They just recently weirdly announced that Bryce Young will be the starting quarterback. We were talking off air, and not a particular surprise to you. You were a little bit weirded out by that it hadn't been declared yet. It seemed pretty nailed on. What do you make? Have you seen much online of how Bryce Young is getting on? Are you excited for what the season has to hold? And what are you nervous about? What do you think are some of his shortcomings?
Well, the word short in shortcomings springs to mind. Not the tallest guy in the world, but it wouldn't be my main concern. My main concern would be is that we've put so much capital into this guy, and I don't really see him as a generational talent. Like, does he match up with Joe Burrow? I mean, the stuff he did at Alabama was incredible, particularly towards the end when their roster kind of fell apart a little bit. They didn't have the stud wide receivers that guys like Jalen Hurts and Tua had while they were at Alabama, and this guy kept winning games. So obviously he's got that dog mentality, right? He's able to win games that maybe he shouldn't be winning. But is he the guy? I'd probably look to the guys coming out of the draft next season and go, they're the guys that I'd want to have. Like Drake May coming out of Carolina looks like a hot shot. The other guy, I can't remember his name, playing at USC, Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, I don't remember either. We'll have to slot it in post. Somebody somewhere in the comments will tell us who we're thinking of.
But he seems like a generational guy. Whoever gets hold of him in the next draft is going to be instantly better. So I think we are better with Young, but is he going to be the guy that leads us to the glory land, to the Super Bowl that we've been craving since the inception of the franchise? I'm not so sure. Yeah, going back to what you said about like only being named the starter, I think that's a weird hangover from the kind of Matt Rule era. This kind of faux meritocracy where you only get your starting job when you have put in the work and earned it. Even like it happened with Ike Ekwonu last season. You draft a guy, whatever it was, eighth overall, left tackle. You're struggling at that position. You're going, no, 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 he's not the starter until he earns it. Same thing happened with Bryce Young this season. It grinds my gears. A first round, first overall pick, and you're telling him that he hasn't got the starting spot already. Obviously, he has the starting spot already. Everybody in the world knows he has the starting spot already. Why not just say it right off the bat? Put all of your eggs in that basket.
Who else is in that quarterback room in Carolina at the moment?
Good question. You have Andy Dalton is the next guy on the list. Outside of that, there's not really anybody. It was Andy Dalton who was the starter prior to the draft.
So while we're on quarterbacks, before we wrap it up and we look what's going on else around the league, because there are other positions and other players, but of course they earn the big money, and big money is of course going to Justin Herbert. He just announced his new record-setting deal. I want to get your thoughts on that, and then also the man you mentioned just previously, Joe Burrow. He's up next for his deal, presumably going to reset the market again. We'll wait and see. Do you think that's kind of par for the course? You're expecting that to happen? Do you think it's a good investment on the Bengals side, given that yes, he's performing really, really well, but he hasn't been able to get them that glory, that Super Bowl? Do you think he has it in him, or do you have some reservations still about Joe Burrow?
Are we talking about Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert here?
Okay, actually, yeah, you're right. Let's start Justin Herbert. Do you think that deal's worth it? And then we'll move on to Joe Burrow.
For me, it probably is worth it. I mean, the Chargers have been struggling to find themselves a franchise quarterback since Jesus Christ, names today.
Philip
Rivers left. And I like the quote from the GM. He goes, "I can sleep a little easier knowing that I have my franchise quarterback in the building for the next 5 years." And I totally understand that, and I agree with that. And I would probably rank him as a better quarterback, like pure quarterback, than the likes of Jalen Hurts and definitely Lamar Jackson. So I think he is deserving of the money. I think that's where the quarterback market is going at the moment. So yeah, I mean, if you can lock him in for 5 years now at that kind of money, absolutely go ahead and do it, because we see he has the talent. He hasn't really got the parts around him to kind of make that drive in the playoffs just yet. But I mean, yeah, if you can get a franchise quarterback and keep him in your building for 5 years, I think it's worth any sort of money.
Yeah, I think you took the point right out of my mouth. I was going to say that the only knock is that he hasn't really done it in the playoffs. He has that playoff win, but he hasn't gone deep. And I think for me, as you just pointed out, like until you have a Super Bowl winning roster around him, I don't think there's anything that suggests to us that he couldn't win a Super Bowl if you put him in the right team. And so you got to make sure you have him there. He's certainly not a rate limiting player right now. He doesn't put a ceiling on how far you can go in the Super Bowl. There's way more important things. I think that back end of the defense specifically has to try and stay healthy. Like they have some great players in that secondary that just can't stay healthy over the long run of the season, especially with that extra game now. So you got to get all that sorted before you start looking at Justin Herbert, in my opinion, and start to say, oh no, he's not worth the money, or he's not getting a second extension. Now, that's 4 years down the road, 5 years down the road before that becomes a problem. So probably that they have that time period, and they'd obviously love to get a Super Bowl within that time period, really seal in the deal for anyone in the front office that has any reservations. But again, you have that time to make that analysis and to build and bring in those veteran players and young talent. We mentioned obviously as well, Joe Burrow, he's expected to reset the market when he signs his deal. We don't know when. There's no whispers about when it is. Again, Rian, I guess along the same mold, he's gone a little bit deeper in the playoffs. He's done it multiple years. He's still got a winning record, I believe, against against Patrick Mahomes, not the easiest thing to do. I guess he's worth every cent as well. I don't know if you have any extra inputs on that scenario over the Justin Herbert. For me, they're pretty similar.
Yeah, there is just one little wrinkle with that Justin Herbert one, is that there's another couple of guys on that roster who are coming up for a contract. I think Jamar Chase is in there, and you're obviously going to want to pay Jamar Chase big money. So it might be worth the Bengals while going with kind of the Patrick Mahomes mold for a contract. Like, obviously this guy is going to be a starter in the league for a very long time. So give that long contract that maybe goes to the like 500 million mark, but it's spread out over 10 years as opposed to giving a 5-year contract, same way Patrick Mahomes did it. That for me makes more sense for the Bengals, because you want that guy in your quarterback room for as long as possible. And it kind of spreads out the load a little bit, makes it easier to kind of keep on players like Jamar Chase and maybe add some big names in the offseason also.
I think as our listeners will know, and at this kind of time, you're going to hear a lot of us talk about different extensions that are being done around the league at the moment. There was one just announced before we came on. The Giants re-signed their left tackle Thomas to 117 million over 5 years. Cole Kmet as well. He got an extension, 50 million from the Bears, the tight end. One extension that I kind of shook my head on and scratched my head, and I want to get your opinion because it's Diggs from the Cowboys, the cornerback. And we spoke about this in the group chat, but obviously I'm a Washington fan. I'm going to be slightly biased, and I apologize to the Cowboys fans if they disagree with me. They can let me know in the comments. But I just feel like that's a bit of a head scratcher. It's a lot of money to pay for a cornerback. And yes, they'll always point and look at the interceptions that he has over the last 2 seasons. But as we said in the group chat, Rian, if you have that many interceptions 2 seasons in a row, for me, that tells me one thing. And that tells me when quarterbacks are turning on the tape, they're looking at you and they're picking on you. Now, you might have been getting lucky, or maybe you look better than you do on tape. For sure, you can't take away from him the fact that he gets the ball in his hands and those turnovers can win games. But such a huge extension for what, in my opinion, is a seal of disapproval from the quarterbacks around the league. It's a little bit of head scratching. They did the same thing with Zeke. He's basically irrelevant there now in Dallas. They're still paying him big money. Dak had a huge extension. I would have to argue he's underperformed, although a lot of people would say he's at least on par with where you're hoping to be. He had that crazy statement where he wanted to definitely have less than 10 interceptions this season. I think there's zero chance of that. Absolutely hammer the over on that bet if you can get it. But yeah, anyway, I've been rambling on. What did you make it a deal as a somewhat unbiased eye?
Yeah, I've never been the biggest fan of Trayvon Diggs, and I'd agree with you. It is a little bit of a head scratcher. You get Zeke off your books finally after locking him into such a crazy contract, and the first guy that you extend properly, like a big contract after getting rid of him, is a guy who is constantly picked on at the cornerback position. Now, at least cornerback has got a little bit more longevity than the running back position. The big long contract for Zeke wasn't really a smart thing for me, like with the way running backs are at the moment, just their short career span, all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, if you look at Darrelle Revis, the best to ever play a cornerback in my position, he had 29 picks over the course of a 10-year career. I think Diggs has 17 in his last 2 years. The reason Revis doesn't have many interceptions on his career is because no one ever threw the ball at him. He was a shutdown cornerback, never let anybody kind of have big games against them. But we've seen lots of players have big games against Stephon Diggs. And a lot of Cowboys fans kind of point to like PFF stats and stuff like this. I think the PFF stats kind of are a little bit inflated for defensive players. They put a lot of emphasis on the interceptions, and that's why he's getting like very low quarterback ratings when someone passes to him or passes in his direction. I think they probably, yeah, I mean, like you could have a guy go for 190 yards on you, but you got 2 picks in the game, so you're going to have a low QBR, but the guy still burns you all day long. So Yeah, for me, head scratcher. I don't see him as being one of the top 5 corners in the league, and that's the kind of money that he's on. So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned there as well running backs and how they're starting to become a little bit devalued. And it's been a big conversation around the league this year. Guys can't get the compensation they're looking for. I don't know if you had a chance. We just recently, Saquon Barkley has announced that he's re-signed with the Giants. 1 year deal, 11 million. I was just reading an article before we came on that said if he'd have played under the franchise tag, that's worth 10.09 million. So there's only a million in the difference. To my understanding, and again, someone can correct me here, but I'm pretty sure if you franchise tag a player consecutively, then that increases significantly the fee that you have to pay the second year. So for me, he only signed a 1 year deal with the Giants. For me, speaking of head scratching, that's a weird decision from Saquon to hold out so long, so aggressively to get 1 million extra. Apparently, there's no guarantee they won't use the franchise tag on him next year. And if anything, you've incentivized the Giants to do that because now they don't have to pay that extra tax of having to franchise tag you twice in a row. And for that fee to go up. So unless there's something, and again, I'm happy to have this discussion. Hopefully some of our viewers have something. I know we've got a big Giants following and they can let me know if there's some details in that contract that make it more beneficial to Saquon Barkley. But at least on the face of it, as I've seen it, again, I don't know if you've had a chance to read through it, doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're risking that injury. I know a lot of it's he's got 2 million in upfront and 1 million in incentives. So I guess that means there's about 7-8 million there in the lifetime of the contract. I don't know what's guaranteed and what's not guaranteed. I can tell you that it's ranked third in a year for third for the yearly salary. So 11 million puts him third among running backs. But then again, that 10 million seems weird, doesn't it? I don't know if it's that second year would force him to pay, I don't know, 12, 15 million maybe. What have you made a whole scenario?
It is a bit odd to me. It looks very much like a prove it deal. It's like play this season, don't get injured, have a big one, and then we'll pay you like a proper running back multi-year contract, kind of 12, 15 million a year. But yeah, it is a strange one. I don't really understand the whole franchise tag situation, how it works. I know it's for players drafted in high rounds and stuff like that, but I thought that after their rookie contract finished, they couldn't place a tag on them. So yeah, I thought that was the whole point of the extension, but obviously I was totally wrong that he would get his 1 year extension, and that means that the Giants can't place the tag on him next year. But now you're telling me that that's not the case. So yeah, it's a strange one. I mean, I guess the Giants, they know what the situation is going to be moving into next season. He's not going to play under the tag, regardless of how much money he's going to earn on it. So yeah, I think this is just a way for both parties to get the most out of it. So Saquon is going to be playing football, which obviously he wants to do. He doesn't want to take a year out. And the Giants get their player at a relatively inexpensive cost. I mean, I think with bonus and all, I think it's a $3 or $4 million difference between that and the cap, or and the salary, or the
Franchise tag.
franchise tag. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if this guy's going to be your guy, then you better think about paying him next year.
Yeah, I think that's you've kind of nailed it there, where they've got Saquon in a little bit of a corner where he doesn't want to really sit out, and that was his only kind of bargaining tool, especially because he wouldn't become a free agent either way. The Giants have said that they would use the tag on him, so even if that means he has to sit for that year, and of course it would make him the third or fourth highest paid running back, even on the franchise tag. But I think that incentivized Saquon to take a slightly worse deal in his personal circumstance just to be able to play and stay sharp. I think certainly the injury probably affected his decision, where he wants to again prove that he is fully back. I mean, I saw enough last season to say that he's ain't got no problem coming back, but I guess there's that little bit of, in his mind, he wants to make sure that he can show his robustness, show his durability, and to do that, you got to be on the pitch. You can't be taking a year out. Didn't end well for Le'Veon Bell, and I think Saquon kind of took a look at that and decided that he wanted to play this season. I absolutely agree with you. So that's all I have to talk about. Is there anything you want to bring up? Is there anything rattling around that, Brian, that you want to talk about before we call it quits for this first NFL show from the Under Center podcast this season?
I mean, yeah, just calling back to those Seahawks throwback uniforms, and you call it a cash grab. We didn't speak about the biggest cash grab of them all, the fucking Indianapolis Colts just turning the stripes sideways on their home jersey. What's that all about? They're just trying to sell jerseys. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, look, I think that's certainly the thing of right. I think if I understand correctly, like Nike kind of cycles these things, right? So not every team gets a new jersey, but it kind of roughly works out every 5 years. They give it a little tweak depending on what happens. Yeah, it really sounds like the Nike guys didn't go above and beyond to do anything. Like you said, what's the point? Just make it look like the old jersey, I guess. You got to have that one obvious visual feature that means the fans in the stands know that you're wearing last year's jersey and not this year's jersey. But yeah, personally, just on the Colts, we had this disagreement on the alternate jersey. I quite like the black and blue with the black helmet. You guys were saying, well, it's just the white jersey turned black. I was kind of saying, yeah, but at least it's something obviously different. It doesn't look
not the
bad.
white jersey turned black. It's literally the home jersey with vertical stripes instead of horizontal.
Is it not black? Am I misremembering? It's a blue
you
jersey?
You are misremembering. It's blue with 2 white stripes going down as opposed to across, and then it's got a black collar. They have
a black helmet. It's definitely a black helmet that I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, it remains to be seen. We might throw up a poll on the social media, see what you guys think. I know the guys already did it heavily biasly towards the Seahawks. We're going to remove the Seahawks and let's see who's the next winner and try and get a bit more engagement on that, so we get a more true figure on what the best new jersey of the NFL season is going to be. Anyway, Rian, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I think we had a good chat. Looking forward to getting back into these NFL shows. I love the AFI, but the NFL is where we cut our teeth on the American football. It's where we started the podcast. So I'm looking forward to get back into the season, start talking about the professional game, let's call it, as opposed to the national game here. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, much appreciated.
And thanks to everyone who's listening. You can find this podcast in the audio version on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Search Under Center Podcast. You can see this recording on YouTube at Under Center Podcast as well. And you give us a follow there, a like. Please do engage with the videos. Let us know what you think. Me and Rian have tried to give you some hot takes to bounce off. Tell us if we're wrong. Tell us if we're right. Hit up those comments. And then again, you can obviously follow us on our social media at Under Center Pod. That's on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, you can find us on Facebook as well if anybody still uses that. Sorry, am I even supposed to call it Twitter anymore? Is it called X now or something? I don't know. I've seen crazy things happening. We don't know. But if you want to get all the most up-to-date, most stable podcasts from us, definitely check out the YouTube. We're putting a lot of effort in there. There's a lot of good visuals going on. A lot of guys doing a lot of good work behind the scenes. So thanks from us here, from myself and from Rian. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.